messages everywhere. And just reports, just anecdotal reports that some people are experiencing slower than usual internet. And again, I was doing an internet recording session earlier today where typically we have no issue. It is complete broadcast studio quality. And we had a lot of belches, hiccups, burps, digital warbles. Again, we'll look into it, but if your internet is slow today, some are suggesting that could be why. We shall see. This hour, and welcome to the Schmidt Show. This hour of the Schmidt Show is sponsored by Home Advisor. Find and hire home pros for any project with the Home Advisor app, or of course, homeadvisor.com. Number here on Schmidt is 800-801-8999, 800-801-8999. If you're experiencing internet issues today, and if there are any computer guys or women out there, or any IT folks, if you're hearing the same thing, or if you're having internet issues, as we continue to research to see if this is a real story that is affecting the internet today, and speeds and traffic in some locations, or hubs getting clogged, and pipe getting jammed down. If you have anything to add to that, sure, join us. 800-801-8999. 800-801-8999 is the nationwide number here on Schmidt on a Thursday. Jobs, some great jobs numbers today, but there is a caveat. There is an asterisk attached to that. We certainly have had some worse news than this, but there is good news today. I mean, I'd like to see some glimmers of hope, although if you think we're out of the woods, you're delusional. If you think that we're done with COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, you're delusional, because we are not. Still amazes me, the folks that think this is a hoax, this is all jacked up and overblown. All the folks, all the hospitals getting overrun now. Yeah, it's a big hoax, it's a big joke. There are folks out there that think that. Oh, this is nothing. Oh, that, oh, that. Anyway, the good news today is that the U.S. economy added significant jobs last month in June. The U.S. economy added 4.8 million jobs last month. According to figures which came out this morning, released by the Department of Labor, and that's better than economists had predicted. They were looking to see us add between 1 and 3 million jobs. That's a hell of a spread, by the way. And we clearly, easily zoomed right past those expectations, those projections, by a significant number. So if the experts and economists thought that we'd add between 1 million and 3 million, let's just take in the middle, let's just take 2 million. Let's say that economists said, oh, we're going to hit 2 million, and we added 4.8 million. Folks, we added 2.8 million more jobs than were expected potentially here. Those gains in June followed the unexpectedly great numbers we had in May, when we added 2.7 million jobs. And yeah, the spikes that we're seeing across the country is that because of, things opening up, and a lot of people going back to work with these jobs numbers. I don't think it takes a rocket surgeon to figure that out. And at the same time, we had the unemployment rate that fell to 11.1%, as more workers who were laid off or furloughed during the coronavirus were able to go back to their jobs. So that is good news. But if you stop there, you would be essentially state TV or state news. That's just a propaganda machine, because that's it for the good news, and let's enjoy those numbers as we can. But there is more to the story here. The incredibly high job figures were calculated in the second week of June, all right? And they are all in the rear-view mirror, and they precede the coronavirus hotspots that have emerged in the southern and western parts of the country. So as I just laid out my predicate, just connect the dots. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Most states began reopening businesses in late May, early June. Social distancing went out the window, especially among the younger population. We had the protests then that followed the George Floyd incident on Memorial Day, May 25th. And those spread all over the place by the end of the last week in May and then into early June. And yet, I am, and I have, and I will assign some of the blame of the spread to the protesters that are around the country. And again, I brought up some of the stories where there is no data to suggest that any of the protests spiked any of the coronavirus cases. And there have been numerous high-profile reports and studies, I'm doing studies in air quotes over here, but the suggestion that, the protests didn't bring about any increase in coronavirus cases, I find that to be ludicrous. I find that to be just idiotic and just beyond common sense. That with all of the thousands of people that were close and marching, even with many wearing face masks, some did not, but the number of people gathering, even though outdoors, had to add to the spread. And what we did see, we saw that in Cleveland, that they are attributing some of the spread and the outbreak in Cleveland, Ohio, and some juiced up numbers to some of the protests. It's common sense. This is not a slight, this is not a slam. It's not a way to minimize the Black Lives Matter movement as far as the gatherings, but listen, in any situation, even a Trump Tulsa rally, not a smart idea in the middle of a pandemic. It's just not. Herman Cain, by the way, we just found out today, news broke that Herman Cain is positive for coronavirus. Guess where Herman Cain was? Herman Cain was at Trump's Tulsa rally in Oklahoma. More on that later. I want to separate those words so it doesn't sound like more on that later. So we'll get into that a little bit later on here on SIG. So I have questions. I have questions on whether some of the early reports that no, Black Lives Matter protests, the rallies, the protests, not doing anything to spike coronavirus levels. I question some of the reports, and was this all part of just political correctness, for instance? And I think that there is a portion that can be attributed to that. Yeah, because we're starting to get some stories now with these spikes. That, come on, it's just common sense that there must have been some effect. And it runs the gamut. Black Lives Matter, huge rallies and protests with tons of people cramped together, not a good idea. Trump rallies with tons of people cramped together, not a good idea. I'm not playing favorites here. I'm just talking about a whole lot of people in one place, all jammed together in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a global health and pandemic emergency. Now, outside, certainly conditions would be less ripe for transmission and spread outside. It's exacerbated if you're inside. That's why the Tulsa thing is not a good idea. But we'll get into some more details on that later. So anyway, the big concern now, obviously, as I've been telling you, is we saw a spike after Memorial Day. And of course, now we're up to the 4th of July. We're just 2 days away from July 4th. July 4th on Saturday. Are we going to see an increased spread because of 4th of July events? And there's a big concern over this. But again, like I said, social distancing went out the window. Mask wearing just almost invisible in many parts of the country. So yeah, a lot of people getting together, regardless of what it's about, politics aside, ideology, event description aside, not a great idea. I mean, it just makes no sense to assume that there was no spread, for instance, at the BLM marches and the George Floyd protests. Now, the